This is We All Be News and Radio.
Ron Hurd. Get up out of bed. Let's go. Let's go. Ron Hurd. That's the word. Get out of bed. Give me a jingle. My number 051. Get out of bed. Let's go. Don't be afraid. This is Herb Smith calling you. Herb Smith. All right, I know you're famous and all that kind of stuff, but let's go. Get out of bed.
And we're moving on to our next segment. Very important. It's like, like I said, I'm giving y'all 2 shows for one. You can't beat this, so y'all should think about really supporting the We All Be movement, because we all about information dissemination in the 21st century. And we got another special guest. This guy is incredible. He's one of the people you think came out of Hollywood. This story is unbelievable, because how can a person with an 8th grade education become one of the most brilliant legal minds and strategists of our times? How can a person who has no office use the libraries of America as his public office? In doing so, he helped to create a lot of lasting institutional changes. Let me just give him his proper due by reading this quick bio. And the second hour, we're talking about giving Justice Crusader, Brother Alvin Sykes, his just due, along with flowers. Brother Alvin Sykes is a self-taught human rights worker who relies on local libraries for his primary research. The Kansas City Public Library's 2013 Scholar in Residence. He works with the justice system on behalf of minorities and the poor. A true man of action, Brother Alvin Sykes has testified before U.S. Congress, been the ears of politicians, and played an instrumental role in creating the Emmett Unsolved Civil Rights Crime Act, which gives the U.S. Department of Justice the means to investigate long-ago cases of civil rights violations. Yet much of his work has been low profile. A case of workplace discrimination here, food stamps denied, or an unfair eviction there. Frequently, his work is not only unpublicized, but also uncompensated, which equates to unsung. However, this day, we will pay homage to the man and sing his praises. Without further ado, this guy is incredible, and I'm so excited and giddy. The one, the only, Brother Alvin Sykes. How you doing today?
I'm doing great and honored to be on your show, Brother Hurd. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure, and I'm just so happy.
Yeah, I'm sorry for taking so long. There's so much information we get out here, but, man, I just want to give you a due, man. Like, much props to you, sir, because I remember hearing about you, man, years ago. I was a fan of A&E's American Justice with Bill Curtis.
Yeah.
Came on in the late 90s, the early 2000s. I can remember that case so well about your friend, exceptional musician, saxophonist, Steve Harvey, not the comedian. He probably is the most talented Steve Harvey, though, actually. But he got killed. He got killed, right? And you, not the police, you actually helped bring the man who killed him to justice. So it's really an honor. Cause I still remember that when I first time I saw that program years ago. And it stayed with me.
That was
City
on
there talking about it. Yeah, it was City Confidential. Right. Thank you for correcting me.
Right.
Those were my best shows, City Confidential and American Justice. But I love that show. So it's an honor to have you on, man, because people need to know more about your story. To me, they need to do a Hollywood movie about you. I mean, Aaron Brockovich can't touch you.
Well, I appreciate you expressing that, but I do have a mission in life and pursue the truth and justice, and wherever that takes me, that's where I go. But I do want to leave somewhat of a legacy so that the younger people can be able to see that this is something that they can do and that they must do. It's a responsibility that goes from generation to generation, and I'm just doing my part now.
Well, the amazing thing about it is, like I said, I mean, you do things like with no shoestring. You have no shoestring budget. You don't have shoestrings. You can't afford them. Yeah, you get more done than the congressmen we have in Congress and politicians that people put millions of dollars behind. How can a person in the capitalistic system with no money, barely any type of resources, achieve the things you have achieved, like being the architect of the Emmett bill, which allowed the Department of Justice to, solve and prosecute these folks involved in these cold cases? How were you able to do that?
Well, it comes basically from 2 points for me. Because number one, it's not a position that you would want to be in to have to do it without the resources. But then if you have heart and you have commitment, and for me, a strong spiritual base, then I'm able to do it with whatever you have. If you're on the righteous side and you have a strong spiritual base, you'll get the assistance and what you need to get across the finish line.
Okay, so I want to know how you got started. I know how you got started, but I know you talked about it in a great Kansas City library interview you did last month. I want to get a viewer's idea of where you came from to understand how extraordinary your legacy, your journey has been. Talk about your roots a little bit.
Well, as a child, I was a child of a 14-year-old child. And fortunately for me, at 8 days old, a 48-year-old woman, Bernetta Page, then started raising me and adopted me in her heart, and raised me up to 12. Basically, I was a sick child, so I had epilepsy and I had this feeling that I wasn't going to live long, and so I had a very serious focus early on in life with a sense of urgency to learn as many things as I could and do as much as I could. I was certainly blessed because Bernetta Page instilled in me the love of reading, and it was starting off at that early age, knowing the value of reading is. I would get up, she would get up with me in the mornings on Fridays to sell the local black newspaper, the Kansas City Call, and sell Jet magazine, keeping me in the reading mode and showing me how important that was, as well as in the entertainment world in terms of music. And she bought a David Graham piano and trombone and trumpet and for me and my sister. So it was a lot of what I'm getting the praise and the accolades for now, the results of, started a lot with this woman here and the sacrifices that she made in raising me. And unfortunately, as time went on during that period, there were people who lived across the street who Mama had said to stay away from, but they had candy, and so that attracted me. And so these people, was a man and a woman, and for a while they would just give me candy, and I'd come over, and then one day the candy stopped. And when I couldn't understand what was going on, then they raped me. And it was because at that point, me being that young and not knowing who to go to or what to do or why this happened and why the candy stopped and why this hurt and all this, I started to realize that there needed to be somebody in the community between victims and families and the law enforcement that can help them make the right decisions. I didn't have anyone like that, so I made a decision to go back and find out why they did it, which resulted in them attacking me again. And then I never went back. But it was the next year when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I couldn't understand why someone would kill someone who had devoted his life to peace, and why the black community would riot and tear up the community behind a man who devoted his life to peace. So that's when I started in my own little way having what I call a community police force, and it was basically me and a friend of mine who rode around, and I was turning in people that were setting the fires and in terms of doing the riot, and it was that transforming moment that let me know that I was going to be the type of person that I was going to live, and that I was going to be the type of person that I had thought about the year before when I was attacked, that there had to be somebody like that. It was then that I realized that I would be that type of person, and that's where my life has been going through various journeys up to now.
Well, what's interesting is like the fact that you was sexually traumatized by this couple. That story is actually more familiar in the black community than people know. I had an uncle in a similar situation to yours who was victimized by a neighborhood person in my mom's neighborhood growing up. This person, actually his sister, would lure my uncle and other young black boys to their home with candy, spend the night and all this stuff. And then her brother actually sexually molested a lot of these black boys. And so this story is more, it's really more familiar than people want to give it credit for as being taboo. But I remember talking to Dick Gregory one day. He talked about don't let certain things become the theme of your movie. Your life is a movie. Don't let certain things become the theme. Like if you was like taken advantage of at a young age, and if you're 50 years old, and all you think about is what happened to you when you was young. Because my thing is like a lot of times it's not about what happened to you, it's about how you respond to that. How are you able to respond to that? Like, be able to get back in the fight? That's amazing to me because, I mean, how were you able to choose another path than one towards of self-destruction and self-loathing?
Well, I have always been very spiritual, even as a child. I was raised in Catholic church, and I was altar boy and all those things during that a period of time, and then I kind of transitioned from the organized church to a more one-on-one relationship with God, as I perceived it. So everything in my life, I can never not remember a period where I wasn't spiritual in having that somewhere at the center of my pursuit. So as time went on, after in terms of riot, my mom was able to get me into Boys Town up in Omaha, and I went up to Boys Town for 3 years, and that was a transition because that was really the first time that I was having male figures in my life. And then I came back from Boys Town and went to live with my natural family for the first time, and that included a cousin, Alonzo Scooter Powell, who was very popular with the local bands, Threatening Weather, and they were, the number one band around here. So when I went to live with him, I started to get involved with the band with him and manage the band and, working that kind of activity and get to know all the musicians around in town since Threatening Weather was so popular. The second thing was there was a community organization called the Social Action Committee of 20, SAC 20, that comes from the nationalist side of the movement, and I joined with them and started learning about my blackness and all the things that comes with that. And it was the combination of those two things in my life that brought me across Steve Harvey, who was one of those prominent musicians that everyone, he was very highly regarded here. And my involvement in SAC 20 gave me the street creds, so to speak, even as a young person, to be able to be involved in it. And that led to the Ad Hoc Group Against Crime and ultimately involvement in the Steve Harvey Justice Campaign in the pursuit of his case. But all during that time, and particularly at the age of 18, I met Herbie Hancock, who was a jazz musician who was practicing Buddhism, and I happened to come to one of his performances from the musical side. But when I went backstage before he was to play, and I heard this chanting going on, I was just so fascinated by it that all I could think about during the whole concert was, what was that noise he was making? So afterwards, I walked up to him and asked him, I said, Herbie, what was that noise you was back there making? And he said, I'm your holy Geikyo, and how we can become absolutely happy from within ourselves, wherever we're at, that we don't have to be a slave to the environment. We can grow and prosper and become absolutely happy right where we are. And spoke from human revolution, about human revolution. And since I was an activist and I wasn't really scared about revolutions, all that was attracted to me. And it's through that 40-year practice with my mentor and now best friend, Herbie Hancock, has led to is the foundation of the revolutionary type of and extraordinary type of things that people see that I do and accomplish.
Yeah, it has been definitely extraordinary. It does take a certain type of principle and discipline, spiritual mindset, I will believe. Because, I mean, how are you able to support yourself doing these things? Like, these are huge undertakings, these cases you're involved in, and things you're traveling to D.C. or, how are you able to support what you're doing?
Well, during the past, it was very difficult. It would be, people would see me, but they wouldn't see the other people who would give some money here or there, or to pay for an airline ticket there. But those people and those type of people have always been there. It's been a very difficult struggle, but because of the belief of the responsibility that comes with being successful at this, it just didn't leave me any choice. And I woke up and I was 15, and woke up and I was 25, and woke up and I was 35, and still pursuing and going forward with it. But now I'm at a transitioning point, because that's not sustainable and for the long haul, and there's a need for the younger people to be able to come up and take those reins and move with it. So I'm transitioning from the not-for-profit world to the for-profit world, and forming a company of my own, Sykes Ventures, to be a consultant type of company, and do speaking engagements and do and write these, particularly my autobiography, but other literary projects as well, to raise the money that's a lot easier or simpler, I should say, to do in that world than it is in the not-for-profit world. And the things that people have seen about me up to now is not what they're going to remember me most positively for the rest of my life. That's to come.
Yeah, I know legacy is so important to you, and in our last segment, we talked about the importance of knowing our history and sharing that with our young people. And my concern with you is the fact that you did so much great grassroots direct action, got the results with no money, no fanfare. And yet, I'm concerned that these footprints you left in the sand is going to be wipe away unless we get a way to get this stuff documented and preserved for posterity. So you say you're transitioning from the nonprofit to the for-profit. What are some steps you're taking to make sure that your legacy will be secured in terms of being told in the books and, you know, documentaries and stuff like that? What are you doing as far as hands-on specifically?
I'm going to be the author of Show Me Justice, The Epic Life Journey of Alvin Sykes. And that is to be my autobiography. Those that participated at the library seen a booklet, which is Pursuit of Truth, and it tells my life story in a synopsis from the library perspective and how I used the library to gain the education that I did. But the Show Me Justice will be the entirety of my life and put it in the perspectives of not only my life, but the times that we were in at the various periods in my life, and then document the pursuit of justice and how it was done. It really doesn't. I don't like talking not to have money for the efforts, but in the reality, it's knowledge is the key to power. I mean, if you can afford a phone call to Washington and you got the right knowledge and the right evidence, you can get a lot accomplished without money. So in the sense of me, over the years, having developed a relationship within the law enforcement and the Justice Department, as well as keeping focus on the pursuit of truth and justice and let that rule and be the road that I travel on, that has made it, the achievements a lot simpler to achieve. But for the level on a worldwide basis that I'm looking toward now, it's going to take more resources. Plus, I'm getting old, and so I don't have a lot of the energy that it was easier to do earlier on. And I want to make sure that there is a financial basis for me and my family when I'm gone, and that's what Sykes Ventures and in particular the autobiography will accomplish.
And also, are you thinking about, I mean, your story is made for the movie, for the big screen, or at least for the little screen somewhere. Are you looking at ways to make your story, your life story, into a movie or some type of even documentary?
Well, I do have an agent that I work with in terms on this, and within Sykes Ventures and the effort that the agent is doing, those are options in all those areas that would be dealt with. So, I mean, there has been inquiries ever since I've got involved with Emmett Till's case. There have been several inquiries from movie direction and different spins that various producers were looking to do. But now that I'm at this point in my life, I'm looking first to get the book down and then work on the screenplay and I am fortunate with an agent out in New York to have that kind of access, and so it's kind of following that guidance in that direction. This year in the event at the library was way more. It was way more than just a scholar in residence ceremony. As great and as tremendous as that was, but what it was really more of was the launch into this latest era of my life on a worldwide basis in pursuit of truth and justice, and to focus on documenting this for in all its multimedia forms for the future.
And how can people book you for a lecture or for a speech or for a workshop? What would be the best way to reach out to you to get you booked, because you definitely can be heard. You know, I feel like you should be lecturing at the greatest law schools in the world, and, you know, you should be in front of young people, and people should know your name. It should be a household name, because it really is a name of respect and honor, and you got a great brand. So how can people book you?
Well, I certainly appreciate that. If people want to contact me directly in writing, it's Alvin Sykes, ALVIN SYKES, Sykes Ventures, SYKES, one word, Ventures, VENTURES, Sykes Ventures, 155 South 18th Street, Kansas City, Kansas, 66102, and it's Suite 290.
So we'll definitely have the information available on the website. We'll post it later on as well. And let me give you
the email. Let me give you the email address. If they want to reach me by email, it's Alvin, ALVIN, at SykesVentures.com. And the telephone number is 913-954-2360.
Yeah, that sounds good. So we got that. We're going to post all the information up, because this guy definitely needs to be making his way around. There is no reason why we can't support people who support all of us. It's the people like Brother Alvin Sykes, the foot soldiers, the grassroots warriors that make life better for everybody else, that make life better for everybody. It's kind of like, you know, like when people, I hear people say, well, I march with Dr. King, or I work with Malcolm X. But, you know, everybody that could validate that, a lot of them have passed on, and a lot of them have not left behind any personal narratives. And I think that's very important that, you know, we document our own history, that we become the teller of our own stories, the recorder of our own deeds. That's so important. So I just want to talk, I want to flip, because I know people say, why are you asking them all this stuff? Because they can just Google you up, they can find so much information on you. So I want to ask you, like, you know, let's talk about the Steve Harvey case. Now, there's such a profound way to make your debut into, like, you know, becoming a real
the national stage.
You know.
Right.
Yes, sir, the national stage.
Steve Harvey was like I said earlier, was a very prominent musician here. And at the time that Steve, both him being killed and then ultimately the state trial, there had been 4 other musicians killed in the metropolitan area. So there was a heightened sensitivity in the musical community and the community at large about particularly with the musical community. When Steve's murder trial that was Raymond Bledsoe, who was charged with his first-degree murder, Raymond Bledsoe ultimately had an all-white jury that acquitted him on the murder charges. At the point that happened, it's when I got involved in the case. I knew at the time that you couldn't do anything more on the state level with the case because of double jeopardy. And because of my relationship, knowledge about the Civil Rights Division and the Justice Department, I knew that was the only option. And so I initiated and called the Justice Department, and who we found out years later was an intern, initially rejected my inquiry and said that murder wasn't a state offense except in certain circumstances, and since neither the perpetrator or the victim was a government official, then it would be a state matter. So then I went back that same day, or I think it was the next day, and another champion of justice from within the Department of Justice was named Donald Berger, and he was like my partner in justice since the age of 18, and I took it to him, and he basically said bull, and the rest that goes with that, and spoke about there being a case out in Salt Lake, Utah, where 2 joggers had been killed by Joseph Paul Franklin, the one who was just executed here not too long ago in Missouri. And that neither that was being federally investigated, and neither one were government officials. So armed with that, I went to the library and went early in the morning and just started looking, knowing that somewhere it would be there, but not knowing where it would be, just knowing that somewhere. And just started looking through all the law books and process elimination, and just got it down to about 10 minutes before closing. I had been there with Steve Harvey's widow all day and found that statute that said whether or not under color of law. And as soon as I seen that statute, and it said that if you deprive someone of their rights to the use of a public facility because of them being a protected class, whichever one it applied to, that it was a civil rights violation. And that's when I contacted back to the Civil Rights Division, end up with that same person, started citing the statute to her. She said, "Oh, that's too much for me. You got to talk to my supervisor." And Richard Roberts got on the phone, and he was an attorney. And after I started to tell him the story and what research I'd looked for, he cut me off and said, "Hey, send me everything you have, because we may be able to do something, since it happened at a park." And that kicked off the 18-month federal investigation that resulted in the conviction of Raymond Bledsoe for only the 4th time in American history under the Civil Rights Act of 1968. And he's still in prison and is now the longest-serving inmate for a racial crime in the United States, having been denied his 30-year parole, mandatory parole, last year.
Wow. That's amazing. And also, what would you consider your greatest accomplishment right there? That would be enough for most people right there to bring the killer of this prominent and up-and-coming musician to justice. Because, like, one thing about Kansas City, people don't understand, Kansas City is a music mecca. I'm in Memphis, but I know everybody know Kansas. I mean, y'all produce some of the greatest musicians of the 20th century. Charlie Parker, so many of them. But what would you say is your greatest accomplishment as a social justice advocate and crusader? And do you like the term crusader? Are you okay with people calling you a crusader? Is that okay for you?
Yeah, because I understand that I do, and I consider myself when I pursue cases in a similar metaphoric way, because I say I'm a long distance runner for justice, not a short distance sprinter, and so you don't see me rushing in and rushing out. I'm there when it takes a long effort to overturn injustice, and I pace myself. So that's why you don't see a lot at the front or in my involvement, but you see it toward the end. So, but it would be hard to say, because so much of it that has happened in my life has been from a personal perspective. Yes, the Steve Harvey case would be my signature case. That's the case that people would look at and say, that's when the national circles started to take me serious and in that type of thing, and having that kind of understanding. But all of my cases are educational or spiritual victories, and so there's a broader circle that I look at in terms of what was most significant and what was most important. For instance, and a lot of people don't know, and they'll know when I do my book, that what I consider personally the most important case to me happened right before Steve Harvey's case. That involved a murder of a not so well-known musician who happened to be a friend of mine in the course of our relationship. he started an affair with my woman, and it ended up in a breakup of the relationship, and then he ended up being killed a year later, and I still took the case, and when they couldn't find who did it, and pursued the case, and the guy got convicted for murdering him. Well, for other people, because that's not a civil rights type of case or, something of a real historical nature, they may have a different measuring stick than I do. To me, that was most important because it went to my character, and that wasn't one I really would have wanted to do, given what had happened. It was easy for Steve Harvey's case in the sense of the pursuit to pursue his case, and it wasn't in this other, and that was more important in terms for me. So in that area, now you have over the course of my life, Emmett Till's case had a very important impact in terms of the case development in what that case has done impact-wise on my life. But other than that, and of course, the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crime Act, those are things that are achievements that occurred along the way, but in terms of measuring them by what is important or more important or what I see as the biggest, like I said earlier, and I meant that seriously, the most important legacy I haven't even achieved yet, and that's down the road, and people around the world will remember me more for that than they will for the things that people in America remember me up to for now.
Like in the biblical sense, always a prophet is always without honor. You know how that goes in their hometown or country among friends and relatives. But also, the Steve Harvey case is so, I believe, it plays a pivotal role in your journey because of the connection to Emmett Till. Can you explain that connection to Emmett Till, Steve Harvey?
Rhea Harvey, Steve Harvey's widow, when I was pursuing Steve's case, she kept saying this was the second hate crime in our family. And in the family tree of her family, not in the family tree of Steve Harvey's family, but in her family tree were relatives of Emmett Till. So when I seen that article in 2002 in the Call paper that was talking about Emmett Till's mother had been trying to get the case reopened since '56, and on the federal level, had been trying, and that there was two filmmakers, Keith Beauchamp and Stanley Nelson, had done two films and felt that they had evidence that needed that could justify an investigation. When I seen that popped to my mind about what she had said about Emmett Till, and then, of course, another case that I'd worked on where the name had come up. But it was after seeing that article that me and Don Berger made the commitment to go and meet Emmett Till's mother after I reached out to her and Reverend Wheeler Parker. And we went to Detroit and met with her and told her what we had done and told her about the connection of the family. Her nephew confirmed it from while we were there in the meeting about the relationship to her relative's family. And then when she agreed to go forward with the creating of the Emmett Till Justice Campaign. And then, unfortunately, 7 days later, you're on the verge of having the first conversation with the State Attorney General in Mississippi that we had arranged for that day. She passed, and so we looked at that moment as being that she had lived long enough to pass the torch on to us to go forward and as much as possible find out the truth, and if possible secure any justice on her son's behalf. And that's what we did from the Emmett Till, from the creation of the Emmett Till Justice Campaign, and moving forward in the two areas of the individual case and then the movement toward the cases collectively under the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crime Act.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I mean, like, your resume is fascinating. I mean, like, you got, like I said, like, it was no small claim to make that y'all one of the finest legal minds in this country right now when it comes to civil rights litigation and things of that nature. I don't actually just, like, because now, I mean, the Emmett Till bill was signed into a law back in 2008, correct? Was it 2008?
Right, 2008. And what I want to do say is, when you said that about that, it gave me a flashback to when Martin Luther King III was introducing me to someone, and he said, well, this is Alvin Sykes. But he says he's not an attorney, but I don't believe it. He just got too much knowledge. Right.
That's right.
But yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut into that, but yeah, you made me think about that. Now, what were you saying?
Yeah, I want to ask, like, in hindsight, like, the bill. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was asking you, like, in hindsight, with the passing the bill, and we have. You think that the bill has been used to its best effect? You think has it been effective in doing the things that were stated for its existence in the first place?
No, and that's in two ways. I mean, one was there never was a manhunt. In developing the bill, it was conceived on the point that there had to be an aggressive manhunt for witnesses and names, that people that were involved in this, either by way of being victims or family of victims or perpetrators or families of perpetrators, but primarily the families of the victims, they were going to leave the South. And they left during the Great Migrations. We said in the development of the Till bill that there would have to be an aggressive outreach throughout the South, not just throughout the North, through the North, where people migrated from the South to the North to find those relatives, and that you would have to make that proactive effort, because these are the people that still have the memories why they don't want to be trusting no federal agents or law enforcement, and you have to be showing that you really need it, that you really are going to do that. And by going through and having those community forums and outreach, I felt that we would have a better chance of getting actual cases that with witnesses and evidence. And the second thing was the scope of the Till bill, where it had to be, which wasn't our doing, but that's what it took in terms of getting it through, was that the case had to be murdered. It had to be racially motivated. Well, that's very difficult to prove, even when it happens in current times with present evidence, to have that kind of hurdle to deal with. And back during that period, that would mean that a lot of cases under review would simply get rejected before, because there wasn't evidence of racial motivation, before they would even deal with the issue of the merits of it. And since most of the most of the perpetrators back then were law enforcement and local law enforcement, we felt and see clearly in hindsight that it should have been racially motivated in under color of law cases, because some of those cases that they rejected under racial lack of racial motivation evidence could have been sustained because it was involving deputy sheriffs in different law enforcement, where you don't have to have the burden of racial motivation. And then the timing of when the cases would when the Till bill would end, and the cases being 69 being as far as it could go. So no, it didn't do as much as it could have did. It did do those things in terms of solving cases that even though they couldn't be prosecuted, people got to know what actually happened in their case, and we're looking at the groundwork of developing the Till Bill 2 that will deal with those deficiencies in Till Bill 1, and make it a more permanent structure within the Civil Rights Division, so that it can cover all the way up to now, and that there be a permanent cold case structure within the investigative infrastructure on civil rights cases, and go from there. And so that's what I've been working on, researching and trying to develop the means for Till Bill 2 and see where that takes us.
You know, also, speaking of Till Bill, I was thinking about, was it succeeding or failing? And you laid out some great, reasons why it's not working and how it could be improved. But I know I told you right before your lecture or talk last month at the Kansas City Public Library, I told you that I found out recently that Olin Burridge, the guy who sworn to chain and gun, their body was discovered on his property, he passed away back in March of last year, and, he never spent a day in jail for what he did or his alleged involvement in the sworn and chain and gun murders. And how do you feel about that when you had this bill made for people to be pursued like him, and they never see justice?
Well, I have two feelings on that. One is a sense of disappointment, but one is not. Because the one that's not is the fact of the matter is, before there was any effort, those people continued to live their lives at ease. They had nothing to worry about. They didn't just do, and they didn't have to worry about getting prosecuted. They didn't have to sweat. They just went on and did what they did. And if you look at how we were in the acts of terrorism, what occurred back during that period of time, when they lynched one black, their greatest accomplishment was to put the fear in the rest of them. And in that sense, we looked at the Till Bill knowing that as late into the game that we were coming into this with this resources, and that it may not accomplish what we set out to do. But in the words of Merle Evers, who testified at the Till Bill hearing before Congress, said while we were there, if it doesn't do anything, go any further than out of that room where the hearing was held, that it would be an accomplishment, because it would show to the people that have gone through this that somebody did care, and that there was an effort as best as could be done. And in the sense of what I say, those folks, even the ones that died, they went to their grave in fear of the next knock on the door being for them. They didn't get to just go and just let life go on. They had a sense of fear until they passed away. That may be a consolation to some. It may be a cop-out to others. But from the standpoint of what we set as our goals in terms of establishing the bill, and I can't speak for all those that came on board at various parts of it and their motivation, but ours was to pursue truth and, if possible, attain justice. And so in that sense, yes, I was disappointed when people like him and others did die without being brought before the bar of justice. But on the other hand, I'm glad that they did. They went sweating and didn't go out easy.
Amen to that. I'm actually speaking of like fear of. Do you ever have a fear of death, like in terms of death threats? Have you ever received death threats from the work you're doing? Because it's very courageous what you're doing. It might not seem courageous to you because that's who you are, that's your character. But to a lot of folks, I mean, you're taking some bold stances against a system, and you're doing things that they're shaking up the status quo, so to speak. Have you ever been a fear for your life or for the lives of your loved ones?
Yes, I've been in fear of my life, but however, and I hope you understand, I've made it a policy and a practice not to discuss security issues, right. Because while there may be a lot of people who may want to be very positive, it may be that one or so that hears something in my response that would help make it easier for them. And I don't want to make it easy for them at all. So my only response is yes, I've had fear, and yes, I believe I got a strategy, spiritual base and other that keeps me going and protects me.
I heard that. And also, I guess I want to ask you, like, a quote. I can't let you get off of this air without asking you your thoughts about the Michael Dunn verdict from yesterday.
Well, I can't, since I didn't focus in terms on it. It wouldn't. I don't have an opinion per se. I started to look into, to monitor it from the standpoint to see if this is something that may have further action that can be taken in it, and because of that and the prospect that it came, it's not good for me to speak on it now because I never know at what point that I may need or become involved in the matter, the potential like that. And so I'm monitoring it, and I'm looking at it from the standpoint of where it goes from here and whether justice has been served, and is there opportunity, if not for greater opportunity for justice, and that's when I'd be speaking.
Yeah, I guess one more. I guess there's two questions. Who has been your most surprising supporter?
My most surprising supporter. I mean, I guess it depends on how, if it's surprising to me, or it's surprising to others. I mean, Herbie Hancock by far is my most strongest best friend supporter. And for those that know me and you know him, that is not as surprising. But if you speak in terms of someone who someone would never think that would be a supporter and who has become a supporter, that range goes from people like Crosby Kemper. They're at the third at the library. People don't know really a lot of significance part of that event, but Crosby Kemper the third comes from a very powerful and financial family in the state, and his family owns the two biggest banks in the state of Missouri and in Kansas, the United Missouri Bank and Commerce Bank. And Crosby Kemper III was the head of the United Missouri Bank, and because of his love of reading, and wanting to do something more meaningful in his life, he wanted to leave the financial world and come to the library world, and became the executive director. They even had to change the state law to allow him to become the director because he didn't have a librarian degree. But what he did have was 23,000 books in his own personal library and his love for reading. So that was something who people did not think would end up being an ally of mine, and certainly the one that Senator Coburn, who is the one that would fit most in the unlikely category of being a supporter. He was the one that initially put a hold on the Till bill, and then after our communication and worked back and forth, he became a champion of the bill and withdrew his hold, and that's how it ended up becoming passed by unanimous consent.
Mm-hmm.
So,
oh wow! I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, so now I could be coming up with all kind of other ones, in terms of along the line. I've been active with every last Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the Department of Justice since I was 18, and since Drew Days, who was the first black one, up to the current one, who I'll meet, the one that's just getting voted in, but up to now, and that has been unlikely, as well as Attorney Generals like Ed Meese and Eric Holder. So it's always been a variety, and so a lot of the surprise comes because of how other people see it as being surprising. But for me, especially with my Buddhist faith and our deep belief in the power of dialogue, I'm just not afraid to reach out and communicate with anybody. And there's been times where I've stood up in court cases on the side of the Klan trying to get on public access channel, even though I beat them in all the other areas all the rest of the time. So pursue the truth and justice. I go whichever way that goes, and in the course of 40 years, there have been many unlikely ones, because my overall strategy is I hold whoever's in office accountable. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm independent, and I'm a statesman as it relates to in my political involvement is from the perspective of what's best for the next generation, as opposed to a political one as to what's best for the next election. And so in going that route, there's a whole lot of unlikely ones, because I'll work with practically anyone who will work effectively and realistically with me.
Brother Sykes, I want to thank you once again. That's a great way to end the show. You are truly a national treasure and beyond category, in the words of great Duke Ellington. We love you madly, man. We want to support you and keep on letting you know about your great work, and also your great faith and the great example you have set for us as well as for generations to come. And I also want to thank my co-host, Dr. Leah, as well, for participating in the first segment, and also our other guest, Sister Dawn Porter and Sister Margaret Block. And I had one more question. I just want to know who's been the most interesting person you ever met in your life. I kind of think I know.
Who's been the most interesting person, what?
You met in your lifetime. You have met in your lifetime.
The most interesting one, I would say, is who in my heart that I adopted as my daughter, Kenya, and her brother, Marcus. And I started to put that in the other category that you asked in terms of my most significant accomplishment. But to come into their lives early on and adopt them in my heart, and them to adopt me in their heart as as their dad, that's been the most rewarding relationship and accomplishment for me. And now that I got between those 6 grandkids, grandsons, all boys.
Wow.
You know, this is where I want to be moving more toward in this phase of my life, because the joy that I got, particularly with Kenya and some of her activities at school, going in parent-teachers conferences and cheerleading games and all, was a joy, much of a joy that I felt that I could have as a man, and couldn't understand after I went through that experience why nobody wouldn't want to go to their kids' games and support them. That's been the most to me, outside of those that I've already mentioned as it relates to Herbie Hancock, who, beyond the physical part of my natural mother and natural father's contribution, and it would certainly, and Bernetta Page, it would be Herbie Hancock after that, who's had the most positive impact in my life with introducing me to this Buddhist practice and staying in my life for all 40 years. And that's what I'm working on now, to arrange to celebrate that achievement by bringing him to Kansas City